So today I'm going to cover smart growth and sustainable development, Go Ventura, and social justice, and the implications for your liberty. Smart growth is an urban planning and transportation theory. It concentrates growth in compact, walkable urban centers to avoid sprawl, and it advocates compact, transit-oriented, walkable, bike-friendly land use, including neighborhood schools, complete streets, and mixed-use development with a range of housing choices. Sustainable development is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Our concern is that these two policies are a threat to our liberty in the United States of America. We're concerned, especially in the Bay Area, that the sun is setting on our liberty. So let me tell you what we define as sustainable liberty. We go back to the founding documents and the philosophy behind the founding documents. Sustainable liberty means preserving and passing on to succeeding generations the rights and liberties and responsibilities that we inherited. So I'd like to quote from John Locke: "The great and chief end of government is the preservation of property." John Adams said property must be secured or liberty cannot exist. And George Washington said private property and freedom are inseparable. Now these thoughts were codified in the Constitution in the Fifth Amendment of the Bill of Rights, saying that no person shall be deprived of property without due process of law, and if they are deprived, there has to be just compensation. And with all due respect to the congressman, I will tell you that that is happening. Private people are being deprived of their property without just compensation, and a lot of it is being done administratively. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I like to contrast this with the UN view of property about public land. Land cannot be controlled by individuals. Private land ownership contributes to social injustice, and land must be used in the interest of society as a whole. It's diametrically opposed to what the Constitution says. So I always say to people, would you vote for this? I mean, this is really a stealth subversion of your property rights through sustainable development and smart growth policies. So what is sustainability? Well, you know, who doesn't want clean air, clean water, better life for your kids, right? Who doesn't want that? But the issue is, how is that best achieved? And if you listen to the sustainable guys and the green guys, it's got to be through government control, because us little people are too stupid to be able to deal with that. What has sustainability become? I mean, it started out as a great theory, but what is it? The environmental movement has hijacked the movement. They attack capitalism, they blame America, they want to transfer wealth, they want to impinge on your constitutional rights, and they want to install a government run by the socio-economic system. I call this the dark side of sustainability. It's big government central planning. It's behavior modification through government mandate. It establishes social justice and it redistributes wealth. This is not about the environment. This is about control and social engineering. What's unsustainable? This is always a good, fun thing to look at. Single-family homes, private transportation, private property, land used for recreation like golf courses, ski runs, fossil fuels, of course. Maurice Strong, who is one of the founders of this movement, he came up with a quote in his opening speech about Agenda 21. "Current lifestyles and consumption patterns for the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels and appliances, home and work air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable." Smart growth and sustainable development imposes draconian controls over land. It coerces people to live in high-density units in urban communities. It drastically limits your use of private automobiles. It confiscates private property, sometimes without compensation, and it redistributes wealth through controls and regulation on land use. I'll give you a very good example. In Livermore, California, I've got a rancher who's part of my group, and Livermore zoned the property in their area with what's called an urban growth boundary. If you're inside the urban, this is what we're talking about in terms of administrative controls as opposed to something that's being done by eminent domain. This is worse than eminent domain in my opinion. So basically what happened was they said, okay, if you're in the urban growth boundary, you can build. If you're outside the urban growth boundary, you can't. Well, he's a rancher, and he's outside the urban growth boundary. The property has been in his family for 4 generations. He has several sons. He wants to build a couple houses on his ranch for them. He is forbidden to do that. His property at one point was valued at $7 million. It's now worth less than $1 million. Nobody paid him for that. That was a taking. It was an administrative taking. So again, with all due respect to the congressman, you've got to do more than vote. You have to get involved locally on almost a day-to-day basis with your local government. Okay, let me move on. Their methodology, they hire consultants, they hire non-governmental organizations called NGOs. They design computer models with leading questions, and Heather's going to talk about this when she's doing her piece. They conduct visioning meetings to develop a consensus. They want to stifle dissent. This is the collective, folks. We're all being herded into the collective. They have core assumptions that go undefined and unchallenged. We're here to help you figure out how to challenge those and define them. They want to pretend that the public is in complete agreement. You want to let them know we are not in complete agreement. They give voice to stakeholders. I'm going to come back to that in a second because stakeholders is a very important concept that everybody needs to understand. And up in the Bay Area, they're taking our bridge tolls and our gas taxes, and they're diverting them from roads, and they're putting into mass transit and bicycle paths and things like that. So this is the reality of smart growth, and this is kind of funny, but I'm going to flip through a couple cartoons really quickly. We have a great cartoonist who works with us, and these are a couple things he's designed. This is the urban village, no cars, lots of windmills, everybody on top of each other in public transportation. This is called traffic calming. I don't know if you have it down here, but up in the Bay Area, we've got traffic calming. It's a little hard to see, but what they do is they go in to the roads and they put in roundabouts and they put in trees and they reduce the number of lanes that you have. They don't want cars in cities, so you're gonna, if you don't have it here yet, you're gonna get it, believe me, if you let these guys have their way. So that's traffic calming. This is cool. We got little places for the animals to go, little tunnels. Now this is an interesting thing, and I bring this up. This is really bad in the Bay Area. Again, I'm not sure exactly how it happens down here, but we have a lot of organizations, Silicon Valley Foundation and Greenbelt Alliance, and what they do is they go in and they grab up all of this property and they make it open space. So they basically take it off the market, and then they turn around and lobby for affordable housing, which is now not affordable because they grabbed all the land. I love this one. We were joking around one day about high-density housing, and one of the things that's really important as you go through this process is to understand the language and to be able to counter the language and come up with your own language. So they have defined us as the sprawl people. That's bad. They are the anti-sprawl people. That's good. Only what we say is they are the vertical sprawl people. So we drew a little cartoon with anti-sprawl. Those guys are, that's a termite mound there. And actually the inspiration of that cartoon came from this, which, no kidding, I did not Photoshop this. This is Zimbabwe congratulating themselves that they designed a building that looks like a termite mound. Congratulations, welcome to the animal kingdom, all you people. Okay, here's another component of sustainability and smart growth. It's the people in their little eco-village and the animals outside. And we don't want to let you guys mix, you know, leave the animals alone. We're going to do our own thing. I always say to people when they paint this picture, they paint this wonderful vision, and that's why it's called visioning, because they want you to think of utopia and how wonderful things are going to be in the future and how great it is. But people never sit down and ask the second and third level questions, and that's really what we want to train you to do and the reason we wanted to get you involved. So in the Bay Area, we've got a requirement by our regional government that says that they want to reduce the travel time people have to go to work. And they want to have houses on top of shops. Well, that brings up a couple questions. If you work in one part of the LA area and you live in another, what does that mean? Does that mean you have to move closer to work? Or does that mean you can only take a job within a certain radius of your house? Is your job too far away? Do you have to move? Am I restricted on where I can shop? They're putting all of these shops below all of this housing. What does that mean to you? Does that mean you can't go to the Walmart? Well, they don't want Walmarts. And how expensive or inexpensive is it to get food from a boutique shop versus go to a Safeway or something? These are the kinds of questions that nobody's really asking. Then the other thing, this was really interesting. We go to these meetings and we record them. And I was going back over and looking at one of the meetings, and we had a person from Napa saying that she was really trying hard to get all of this affordable housing in Napa, because you know all the rich people live there and they don't have housing for the poor people, and so she wanted housing for the poor people. Well, if she brings housing in for the poor people, what does that mean to the employer? Can they only hire people that live in that area? Think about that. The other thing they try to do is get you out of your car. I was kind of thinking, oh, hey, here's something from Europe saying it takes extreme measures to get people out of their cars, so we're intentionally making it harder and more costly to park. As Glenn Beck says, first you nudge, then you shove, then you shoot. Okay. Well, I was feeling pretty good about that, because that's Europe. And then I found this, parking in the Bay Area. Taking a major step in 2009, they are going to do some parking reforms to integrate with the Regional Climate Action Plan. That means they're going to make it harder to park and a lot more expensive to park, because guess what? We don't want your cars in the city. And I love this. This was designed by an urban designer. And these are called the soft cars, so they blend in nice with the bicycles and the pedestrian traffic. Sheeple cars, I think they want to call them. Okay, there is an organization called Smart Growth America, which is the reason I asked the question of the congressman. There was a vote supposedly that was taken recently, or was coming up for vote, about funding sustainable communities. And this organization called Smart Growth America was out there sending letters to all of their zombies, telling them to call Congress and tell them to vote to fund sustainable communities. So we sent an email out to all our buddies and say, call your congressman and tell them to defund sustainable communities. You got to get on the bad guys list. Anyway, these guys go out and they'll come to your community and they will help you design smart growth. And that middle one there, using LEED, that's ND is neighborhood development, and LEED has to do with environmental things. And if you go to that website, you'll see a checklist, and it's like 5 pages long of a checklist of all of the things they want you to do in your community so that it's smart growth. You should take a look at that. This is in, so I found this, again, this is the Bay Area, but this was done many years ago, and I want you to know this is coming here. Sustainable education permeates our schools. So when we were coming in today, I was telling Susan, there are a lot of aspects to this. We have to do triage first, which is stop the bleeding, and that's the property rights issue. But once you get beyond that, they are in the schools, they are in everything. So this is only the first step. they want to make 1 million acres of open space in the Bay Area. Like that car? Who's that? Who's that? Okay, you have your challenges here, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit later, but as you can see from this, all of the, I call it the grievance and gimme groups, they're all in on this, and that's the Association of Bay Area Governments down in the corner. So they've got people in all of these groups that are lobbying the Bay Area governments to implement the sustainable development. And nobody's been challenging them, at least until Heather came along with her group. So basically, when you look at sustainable development and smart growth, they're really trying to drive a nail in the coffin of liberty. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the good news and the bad news of Southern California Association of Governments. That's SCAG. That's your equivalent of ours is ABAG. Yours is SCAG. I don't know who comes up with these acronyms. And the Metropolitan Transit Commission. Your organization is actually bigger than ours. You've got 191 cities and 18 million residents. We have 7 million residents in 9 counties. Okay. So the good news for you is SCAG has decided that they're going to talk to local governments and stakeholders about land use, residential densities, and building intensities. They've developed some sub-regions, so you need to get involved and find out who your sub-region group is. And they're actually saying they're going to listen to counties and cities, and they're going to do a bottom-up iterative process. That's really good news for you. The bad news for us is they're coming at us from the top and trying to squish us down. But that's the good news. Okay, so like I said, they have some unique approaches down here with these subregions. The two that I found, Gateway Cities Council of Governments and Orange County Council of Governments, and you probably have Ventura County here. The bad news, social justice is perverting the process. Is Bob still here? Did he leave? Okay, Bob White is my researcher. And when we started in on this process of preparing for today, we thought that we were going to just tell you, just change Bay Area to SCAG, and we'd have the presentation already done. And there's Bob. Take a bow. Everybody clap. Thanks, Bob. He's the brains behind the operation here. And so we thought we were just going to be able to do that, but in reality, you have a different situation down here, and he was the one who dug up all of the social justice crowd. So what we've been able to find from what we could tell is that when SCAG started out, they really did have good intentions. They really did plan to have local counties and local communities give them input into the process. What Bob found when he was going through this is once they said to Ventura County, hey, you guys have it, give us your plan and then we'll take it up. All the social equity guys showed up and they perverted the process. So you now have the 3 E's making their way through your community. We'll come back to that later. So what we have when you look at these guys, we've got social justice, transportation justice, environmental justice, social equity, and media justice. Everything but equal justice. And if you look at their websites of these groups, and I'm going to come back to the groups a little bit later, this actually came off the Coastal Commuter website. They talk about social capital, social equity is the fair distribution of costs and benefits of government policy decisions across groups that make up a community. When those groups are defined in terms of income, race, ethnicity, it is referred to as vertical equity, also termed environmental justice. Now, when we went to our visioning sessions in the Bay Area, the second question they asked us was, what is your ethnicity? Why does that matter? We're all Americans, aren't we? No, we want to categorize people. Okay. I bring this up, this happens to be Santa Barbara, but I bring this up because the bad guys are out there and they're very active and they're very well funded. And this happens to be a list of questions that they ask for people running for office, asking them basically if they support the bicycle coalition. So we have to get active and do our counterpart and be asking our questions. This is an organization that is up in the Bay Area, but unfortunately for you, they've metastasized down here. They're called transformca.org, and if you go to their website, you will see a list of their coalitions. They have 150 people in their coalitions. I just took the first page off. I couldn't have all of them in this thing. But if you look at here, you got bicycle guys and homeless guys and community associations and unions and rail alliances. These are the guys that show up at the meetings and lobby for mass transit. I like to call them the AAA Acorn Against Automobiles, is what they are. And they come out to these meetings and they support the social equity scenario. And this is going to tie back in with you because this is what you're going to be facing shortly. Once they found out, after Heather's group was really active, and she's going to talk about that when she comes up, once they found out that we were there, first of all, they wondered, how did we find out about it? Why did we even show up? Because they're used to not having any opposition. But once they found out that we were coming, they started showing up with these social equity signs. That guy, by the way, I'll come back to him. So here they are, social equity guys, a bunch of happy people. See the guys in yellow here? That their t-shirt says ACCES. That's what Acorn morphed into in California. That stands for the Alliance of California Community Equity something.
We have cause here.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. I was going to come to cause in a second. So the next thing I think is a testimony.
Morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address you this morning. Thank you for the progress that has been made over the last several months. I want you to pause for a moment and see how many people in the audience are supporting the equity standalone agenda. We are doing this because we believe deeply in one Bay Area. We believe the voices of those who have been left out for the last 20 or 30 years in the metropolitan planning transportation process need to be brought into it, and we believe everyone should have the right to access to information that will give us the best alternative. We strongly support the notion of creating opportunities for people who are now marginalized in areas that have good schools and great jobs. We strongly support the economic opportunities that can be created. We strongly support an economic agenda for the social equity, for the equity process, and for the sustainable communities process. So we urge you to vote for both the standalone social equity scenario, and if necessary, the fifth scenario, which is an outer expansion scenario, with the equity scenario, which will actually provide opportunity for people who live in the region to get access to opportunities that they don't have now. So we urge you to support the standalone scenario, possibly replacing the fifth scenario with that one. Thank you.
Dwayne DeWitt.
Okay, that guy is won an award from the Ella Baker Center, which is another Van Jones operation. He's with an organization called Urban Habitat, which is another spawn of transformca.org. These guys have a $2 million budget. Transformca.org has a $2 million budget. I don't have any budget. Neither does Heather. We're doing this on our own. But I'm here to tell you, there's a lot of people that are arrayed against you, and you have no idea. Who's pushing this? The uber wealthy, mega rich elites and the useful idiots. And if you talk to the uber wealthy, rich elites, here they are driving their Priuses and their bikes and buying carbon credits, but living in their big houses. This is like hypocrisy on steroids. And here's the reality of what's going to happen with these low-income people. They get these low-income people all jazzed up to come and argue for transportation justice and social justice and all this other stuff. But the reality of what they're proposing to these people means they're never going to get out of poverty. They will always be in the little transit village wishing they could buy a house that they will never be able to afford. And on the right-hand side, you see bureaucrat estates. So what is in Ventura? I always love Al Gore. He always talks about big oil and big coal. Well, it's really big green. There's a lot more money in big green than there is in big oil and big coal. And in your area, Ventura County, thanks to Bob's research, we found that there's CAUSE, COAST, Ventura Climate Care Options organized locally, and ASSERT. Keep an eye on these guys because they're going to do exactly what you saw with my buddy Carl Anthony there on the social equity side of the house. And if nobody shows up from our side, guess what happens? They prevail. So what they've done is they've gone into your Go Ventura plan and they've now added in the 3 E's. This is classic sustainable development, smart growth terminology: environment, equity, and economy. In California, we have a real problem because locally in the state, they were codified into law, if you will, with AB 32, which is our cap and trade law, SB 375, which is our carbon emissions law, and AB 214, which is state redevelopment funds. Now, it's worse in the Bay Area than it is down here, so I just throw those out. Those are the laws that in the Bay Area they're using to put their boot down on our throats. Like I said, it's not quite as bad here, but you got to keep an eye on it because it's happening in Ventura County, and it's going to become part of your plan. So CAUSE, if you go to their website, they want to give you a living wage and sustainable development. Their vision is collectively, community organized, local living wage ordinances, and community benefits and long-term sustainability. That's their mission. ASSERT is into social equity, vertical equity, and environmental justice. We found this, thanks to Bob. Kids versus global warming, empowering the youth to lead a green revolution. You've got a young kid out there that's 13 years old. He was invited by Al Gore to go around and speak. He's part of a group called Inconvenient Youth Alliance for Climate Education, Rainforest Action Network, Youth Sustaining the Earth, blah, blah, blah. I like the United Steelworkers. I don't know how they kind of fit in there, but that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Gotta wonder about these guys. So there you have an organization in Ventura County, Social Justice of Ventura County, it's called. And here are some quotes from these people. The means of addressing all historical wrongs that have divided people and determined that one person's value is intrinsically greater than another. That's what they do. They're into making society work fairly for all members so that everyone participates. They want to build a permanent base of people power. People power. Okay, that's us against them. Greater social justice. So if you look at their goals down there, they want means equality of opportunity. They want to encompass economic justice. These are all code words. All these justice words are code words for redistribution of wealth. And in the Bay Area, in our Transit Commission, they actually put out a letter saying that the purpose of the transit plan is social equity and the 175% wealth redistribution. It's in their documents. I can show it to you. Okay, moving right along. So I'm going to have to do something real quick here to show this video because I couldn't get it quite to work the way I wanted it. Here's your social justice in Ventura County.
Social justice is about equality.
It is assisting those people who have not up to now known they've had a voice
We give $50,000 each year. We give it to several. We give it to between maybe 6 to 8 organizations.
I think the process of sitting around a table and looking people in the eye and creating a consensus and say, this is what we want to do, and how can we help organizations who are struggling because they're small, but what they're doing is important.
We received a grant late last year from the Social Justice Fund of Ventura County. We're out there being able to socially talk about things that are important to our community.
Social justice is a fight.
Social justice is equality for all members on earth.
Si CLU no hubiera ayudado a mí y a mi familia, creo que ahorita hubiéramos de estar separados.
Social justice is me doing what I can to help those in need.
Before the streetlights went in, families felt really unsafe. There was a lot of street crime and loiterers.
Now that we have the streetlights, we feel safer.
I am just overwhelmed and filled with joy for the process that our organization has the chance to go through. Our long-term goal is a mural on every corner.
Your money will not simply do a project, that it is a seed that will grow and will expand. And I would say you need to invest in us.
Okay, so who benefits from all of this social justice stuff? It goes to preferred groups, minorities, low-income people, transit riders, walkers, bikers, and unions. It goes to, and yeah, okay. You have to know the term stakeholders, underline the term, star the term, stakeholders. It's a very, very important concept. So first of all, I want to say that in the United States was based on equal justice. And that means that no matter who you are, how rich or how poor you are, we have laws in this country, in theory. And we're based on the rule of law. And that means that if I go in front of a judge and I did something wrong, whether I'm rich or poor, the outcome should be the same. That's equal justice. Social justice is the collective. And that's the problem that keeps coming up in all of this stuff. You've got people organizing, community organizing for the rights of the collective. It's the opposite of what we're about in the Constitution, and that's an important thing. So in law, when you're dealing with property, in the olden days, you used to have a buyer and a seller to property. And the buyer owned the property and had the legal right to sell it. And the seller, for consideration, money or whatever, would sign a contract with the buyer, and they would do a transaction, and that would be a real estate transaction, and that's how property got transferred. Well, what's happening now is you've got a stakeholder, which could be me and my dogs, because I like open space, I like to let them run, and I can see my buddy rancher up in Livermore, and I envy that property. I'm a stakeholder in his property. The bicyclists are stakeholders in his property. So what's going on in this country is you've got a lot of people that have no business dealing with what's happening with a piece of property, claiming a right to make a decision on what happens with that property. And those people are called stakeholders. And that's been going on right under our noses. And unless we stand up and get involved in it, that is going to continue and get worse. It's really important that you know what the language is of these people. It's a great example here, and Heather's going to cover it later, open space. What does open space mean? Well, in reality, if you look at their plans, open space is going to be the place where people don't go. This map was designed, and it was actually presented for the Senate for a vote. It's the biodiversity map. And when Dr. Kaufman laid this map out, every place that's green is where people go. Every place that's red is wildlands preserved, and then you have to have corridors between those places so the animals can walk between the places. Now, Congress defeated that bill, but it's being implemented through policies like land use policies in the Bay Area. So back again to the congressman, with all due respect to him, this stuff is going on right in front of our eyes by other means. And you'll see what Heather talks about open space. Okay, let's talk about language. Sustainable development is subsidized development. None of these things can be done on an economic basis. They all require some form of subsidy, either tax subsidies or zoning subsidies or special dispensation to waive the laws in order to make these projects work. And a lot of them don't work. A lot of them have ended up going bankrupt. And Deborah mentioned the book by O'Toole. There's a website that's really good. It's called American Dream Coalition. And if you go to that website, on the right-hand side, there's a link that you can click. It's called Smart Growth Disasters. And it's got Portland, San Jose, and Cincinnati. And I think all of that documentation actually came from O'Toole. And if you go on there, you can click and you can actually go through the slide presentation of the disaster that smart growth has been in these areas. It does the opposite of what it says it's going to do. Smart growth is high-density housing, mass transit, land use control. Affordable housing is subsidized housing. They start off by grabbing the land, making it open space, and then, uh-oh, we can't afford to build cheap houses. Why? Because we tied up all the land. So we have to subsidize them. Equity is redistribution of wealth, pure and simple. Social justice, it's the opposite of equal justice under the law. Visioning is a process of attaining consensus, which is what Heather will be discussing. Consensus is a phony agreement to a predetermined outcome. What they're going to do with you when they get in these meetings, and they'll do it in a lot of different formats, is they'll say, okay, you can do A, B, or C. What about D, E, and F? No, those aren't the choices. Those A, B, or C. So what they've done is they've already, by definition, determined within a very narrow range how they want you to decide. And you have to stay color within the lines. That's pretty much what it is. And so unless you start raising objections to this, you're going to get sucked into this whole methodology of, well, we had agreement. Everybody likes what we're doing. Stakeholders, again, it's a person or group with no legal interest in the property dictating its use. Pretty scary stuff. So what Bob was able to find out with the Go Ventura plan is you've got a plan that's going to 2035. Now I love this because the Soviets only had 5-year plans, right? We're getting into 25-year plans here in this country, which is pretty scary. They've gone through the several phases of the process already, and if you notice there on the second line, Ventura County Civic Alliance, they were the one that hijacked the plan and put the 3 E's in. Every time you see the 3 E's, that should ring off warning bells because that's the social justice stuff. So the compact works with community leaders and local government to launch a process for community dialogue and consensus building on the vision and blueprint for the county's future. You guys need to get involved in this process or you're going to get steamrolled. They've already been through 2 phases of this project, and they're going to be launching phase 2.5 in 2011. It's currently in progress. Common Sense, California. Then they're going to have phase 3, which is pending, and we don't know what's going on there. So the Ventura County Transportation Commission is involved in this, and you've got a mayor here, Bill Fulton, mayor of Ventura. He just happens to be an urban planner and a politician. Now, all of these urban planning guys have been trained in smart growth and sustainable development, and they're all for it. So you guys need to get in and talk to your planning people. This guy in particular is one of the leading advocates of smart growth. He's got a degree in urban planning. He's been a commentator. He's written books on urban planning. You want to check those out. And he co-authored a regional planning guide with a guy named Peter Calthorpe. Now, we love Peter Calthorpe up in the Bay Area because Peter Calthorpe did all the visioning sessions for us in the Bay Area that said, do you like open space? Oh yes, we love open space. Thank you, Peter. And the funny thing about Peter is that he's got a design and architectural firm, and he stands to benefit because he designs all the smart growth stuff. Funny how that works. Okay, why is this happening? It's happening because of ICLEI. ICLEI stands for International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. They found out that people were getting wise to them, so they've now changed their name to Local Governments for Sustainability, but it's still ICLEI. And I think that's important because usually when we had this discussion earlier, if people start off and talk about Agenda 21, they're going to think you have the tinfoil hat on, so don't even go there.
Did you read that about me?
No, but I've had it. Come my direction. Okay, so why did they call it ICLEI? Well, it's very clear that there is a connection between ICLEI and the UN. But this is really interesting because Gary Lawrence, who's an advisor to President's Council, President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development, which he founded, what Gary Lawrence had to say was participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out many who would actively work to defeat it. Duh! So we will call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, and smart growth. So they're trying to snooker you, basically, is the bottom line. And we just have to be smarter than them. Now, when you're talking to somebody among your peers, go ahead and talk about Agenda 21, I don't really care. But if you're out there in the field and you're trying to recruit other people to help you, talk about property rights, talk about where it's going to hit them, how it's going to devalue their property or make it difficult for them to move forward. Let's look at ICLEI members. The reason I come up with ICLEI is because you can actually go to the ICLEI website and see that your city and county, Ventura, is on that ICLEI website. So that's undeniable. There is a connection between ICLEI and your county and city. What I love about ICLEI is China and Russia's involvement. China's Undersecretary of Economic Development is on the UN Conference for Sustainable Development, and he recently gave a speech at the National Press Club, and he basically said, "It's a great pleasure to be here at the outset. Let me thank my host, ICLEI. You are a longtime partner in the United Nations," going back to Rio 92, sorry. Oh, and then Mikhail Gorbachev, actually, he founded an organization called Green Cross International. They happen to be at the Presidio. Thank you, Nancy Pelosi. And they are into all of the green, smart growth. Now, I love it because the two greatest industrial polluters are China and Russia, right? And they want us to do smart growth. Okay, and here he is at a high-level UN symposium, Mr. Shazing or whatever. Okay, here are the counties, here are the cities in your area, Southern California, that are part of ICLEI, and Ventura County are in ICLEI. What does ICLEI do? It transforms local governments into regional governments. ICLEI makes a really big point, even locally in your city, to take control away from the elected officials and give it to staff. You heard the congressman. Staff is going to do this, the planning staff. Local land use and climate action plans use sustainability to implement global initiatives, and it allows decision-making and actions to occur without public process or a phony public process. I bring this up because ICLEI is coming up with in June, they're coming up with a new symposium in 2012 down in Rio. It's going to be the 20th anniversary of the founding of ICLEI. I would strongly urge you as a minimum to your city council to tell them no public funds to send any public employee to this conference. What they're going to do in this conference, I love this red part, UN Environmental Organization or World Environmental Organization are going to establish those, and then they're going to use the role of international environmental arbitration and international environmental court. Like that? How do you think that's going to work out for us? Okay, this is off ICLEI's website, and they're very proud of how many cities have signed up to go. Let's not let our cities go to this event. And then ultimately, I would hope that you would want to get your city and county out of ICLEI. Now this, again, this really bothers me. The more I get into this, the worse it gets. This social justice and environmental stuff has been metastasized throughout our government at all levels. And this is off of the EPA's website. They have a federal interagency working group on environmental justice. And here are all of the organizations. And there is a National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Getting pretty bad out there. So all of these things mean loss of local control. And what we need to do is get control back locally, because ultimately, it's we the people. And the only way we the people are going to have an effect is if we get involved in local government. I know it's a pain. There are 10 zillion things I'd much rather do than do this. But our freedom is at stake, literally. This is the way our founders envisioned government. And this is what we have right now. This is not good.
But we have to be free. Man has to be free. The only reason we found out about this is because there are citizens paying attention to what is going on in their own local communities. We have been paying attention to Washington. We must stand guard on our own communities. Some people now have begun questioning and standing up to what on the surface seems like a harmless initiative just to save the environment. But it is not. Be awake. Spread the word. Watch your local community. The answer will be found with the individual. The answers and the solutions will be found in the local communities. But once they put their fangs into our communities, they'll suck all the blood out of it, and we will not be able to survive. Watch out. I told you before, and boy was I hammered for this. I know now why. When I first warned you about a year and a half ago, watch the words social justice. It's like I said last night, Princess Bride. You keep using those words. I do not think it means what you think it means. They don't. Social justice. A lot of people interpret that in, it's what God wants me to do. Yes. But God wants you to render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. Jesus never said, take the coat off of your back and then give it to the government and have him divide it up and give it to other people. No, that's for us to do. Look for the buzzwords social justice and look for the buzzwords sustainable development. Some people involved may actually have a pure heart and believe in it the way you do. Most do not. Those who want more government controls are never going to come out and say it. They've got to trick you into it. But the more you follow the usual suspects, the more you'll recognize their hallmarks, and the more you can ring the bell and protect your own community.
That's a summary of a 15-minute segment that Glenn Beck did on June 15th. It was one of his last broadcasts on Fox. And I have to say, I'm on the 912 committee, and Bob White, who did all of the original research, he and I put together some stuff for Glenn over a year ago, and we finally got it on TV. So this is, I think he summarizes it right there. Get involved in your local community. This is here, and these people are out there, and they're well funded, and they're not supporting you, and they're not supporting the Constitution. We want people to be community organizers for the Constitution. Nobody's doing that right now. So I'm going to just quickly, everything that smart growth says it's going to do, it doesn't do. It does the opposite. So just be really conscious of that. Like I said, I'm not going to spend time on this, but San Jose is a great example of how smart growth does not work. And they recently won an award where they were going to get $4 billion in venture capital for 25,000 jobs. That's $1.6 million a job. How sustainable is that? And by the way, we just lost 1,000 jobs because of Solyndra. Thank you, taxpayers, for $500 million. So what I always like to say, remember in the 60s, what did they used to say? What if they gave a war and... Okay, what if they gave a war and nobody from our side showed up? That's what's been happening, folks. We lose, and we've been losing big time in the Bay Area. Hopefully with Heather, we're turning that around, but hopefully down here you've got a head start on us. You need leadership, you need volunteers, you need to educate people, get more people involved in this, speak out, support each other. I've got a property rights primer that has a lot of the videos that I showed you already on it. Most of these things are on YouTube and you can link to them. We've got a website on YouTube called If you go to youtube.com/Tea Party Television, you'll find a lot of this information there. There's a book by Brad Thor. It's a fiction book. It's called Full Black. And in the book, the good guy says to the bad guy, you know, how am I going to know when this glorious global government shows up? And the bad guy says to him, you don't have to look for anything. It's already here. It's all around you. You've been looking right at it for years without knowing it. You still have your name, you still have your flag, you still believe you have your freedoms, though in reality they have been slowly siphoned away. You still have a republic when day to day what you are being left with is merely the illusion of a republic. Your entire house, as it were, has been rebuilt one brick at a time and no one even noticed. No one has done a single thing about it. Let's not make that a reality. Let's keep that in the fiction department. So, time to get involved. No more sunshine soldiers and summer patriots. Educate yourself. Monitor your city council and your county. No funds for people to go to Rio 2012. Cancel your ICLEI membership if you get in your city and tell them you want to cancel if you didn't vote for it. Review your city plans and get sustainability out of, the word sustainability, out of the documentation. Monitor SCAG, Ventura, and the social equity groups. You might want to start doing some Freedom of Information Act requests, find out where the money's going. We found out, and send letters, show up, sustainable liberty. And I throw this up here just kind of as a joke. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Don't get into a discussion with somebody initially on Agenda 21. Don't get into them with a discussion about, you know, greenhouse gases or global warming isn't real. That's going to go nowhere initially. Always start out with property rights and how it's going to affect somebody. If they start talking about Agenda 21, say, no. Right now we're just talking about property rights and how it's going to affect you. So, in Star Wars, these aren't the droids you're looking for. The other thing I would be really careful of, and Heather's going to cover this when she does her piece, is this is an article that came out after we were involved in one of the meetings, and they slimed us. There's an organization in Berkeley called the Center for Comparative Study of Right-Wing Movements. There's nothing for left-wing movements, by the way. And this right-wing movement guy talked about how the MTC, the transit guy, said these Tea Party activists, they were an organized group, and this right-wing movement guy said that we were very vocal and obnoxious and we were grounded in ignorance. And the Transform CA guy said that Tea Party supporters' combination of vehement ignorance threatens to undermine the public process. So be careful when you go into these things. You go in as individuals, you ask questions, you be respectful. Heather's going to talk about this more, but it's real important because you don't necessarily want to come across as some wild-eyed tinfoil hat person. Okay, finally, toolkit. You might want to develop a toolkit. What I did here, there's a website called GuideStar. And GuideStar gives information on nonprofit organizations. We pulled up something on GuideStar from Transform CA. This is out of Oakland. So like I said before, they're a $2 million organization. You can see here what they do. But here's what's interesting, where they got their funding. The taxpayers in Alameda County pay this guy $800,000 for something. And we're still trying to find out what that is. What we've been able to detect so far is that he got some kind of grant for developing a program called Safe Routes to Schools. That's taxpayer money going into these people. So be aware of this. Think about doing Freedom of Information Acts. California Public Records Act, there's the part there, the code that you want to reference. I request access to copies of the following: all communications, contracts, expenditures. You can do that with ICLEI, you can do that with these urban things. Your tax money is probably funding a lot of these equity groups. So this is just general stuff about get involved. When I try to explain this to people, I think about this poem. First they came for the ranch land and the farmland, and I didn't speak out because I like open space, bike paths, and hiking trails. Then they came for the water, and I didn't speak out because I was not on a lake or a river. Then they came for the airport, and I did not speak out because I was not an airplane owner or a pilot. Then they came for my house, and there was no one left to speak for me. They pick us off, they go after us one by one. I was talking to Susan earlier about ranchers. You know, those guys are easy targets right now. You need to find out who the ranchers and farmers are in your area and talk to those people and help them out. And they will help you out. It's real critical that everybody get involved, because if not, we're going to go down one at a time. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. I hope you will all act, and I hope you will all speak. I hope this is the beginning. Thank you very much.